Welcome back. This is the third and probably the last episode in which I'll be discussing my next big project. I'll give you updates from time to time, but we won't be going into the code that deeply anymore. Okay, we're now in version 3, and I started recording this episode, and wouldn't you know, there's a last minute bug that I've had to track down and find first. Yeah, such is life. Okay, so let's have a look at what it looks like now. Okay. So that looks pretty good. Pretty much the same as last time, right? Well, have a look at this huge tooltip telling you exactly what to do. After the first time, you shouldn't need that anymore, right? So, as before, we can move this thing around. Let's put it right there, right next to me. Okay, so let's quit it. Now watch what happens when I run it again. It now remembers where I left it the last time, which is something we need. Also, let's have a look at the tooltip. And it's much abbreviated. So those are the main changes that have been made. So how did we do this? Well, we now have in config settings, I don't know if I ever told you, but I've decided to call my program Jetty, because in next step it was called the doc, and some Linux lookalikes call themselves Wolf, so mine's called Jetty. So Jetty, and there is my little configuration file. And it's very, very simple. Let's have a look at it. Just plain text configuration. I could have done this in extended attributes, but there's no real point. Right, and it saved the position 192 across and 640 down. And it uses a stone tile and the styled edit icon. And that's it. That's all it needs to remember. Let's see what happens here. First thing is that we recreate this directory to hold our configuration files, because if it doesn't exist, then it will crash. That's where the error was that made me redo this video, by the way. So it's a bit of a waste to do this every time, but it's only a few cycles, rather safe than sorry. Maybe the user just deleted things at random. Okay, so this is now where we create the various global variables, and here, where here. If we still got default starting points for the first time you run this program, but if this configuration file exists, then we open it and we read the X start position, the Y start position, the name of the tile, and the name of the icon. So they always have to be constructed in that exact sequence. Now you can have configuration files that say xstart equals etc. etc. It takes a bit more parsing though, and these things are not meant to be human readable, human editable. So if you're going to edit these things by yourself, you're on your own. Alright, here is the tooltip. If the configuration file does not exist, then add all this stuff to the tooltip. Otherwise, just have this very short tooltip. So if it has already been moved around and the configuration has been saved, then your user will only need a very short tooltip. I may get rid of it completely in the end. Right, and there is your main. Okay, so now we have a slightly different thing because we have something new here. We have a pop-up menu. If you press M, then this little menu here comes up, and you can say take this to the right margin, and then it goes all the way over there. Right. This duplicates what we already have, and it may not survive, but I needed to know how I would do that, because once I start writing little doc apps, they may need a menu, right? So that they may need that little, for instance, if I write a clock doc app, do you want this menu, this clock, to run in 12-hour or 24 hours? Do you want it analog or digital? So that sort of thing had to be taken into account for, and so now I know how to do it. But here, since it just duplicates what I'm already doing with the key presses, all it does is, if the pop-up menu selection is left, then change the key input, which we already picked up here, where let's see, here, a bit further up, there, and change it so that once you get to the old part of the main loop, it'll react accordingly. So that was fairly easy, really. Now, rather than having to rewrite all this stuff again, I just change the variable that goes into the main loop. Right, and now you got some new subroutines. Save config. So this one, after every move, after every change, it saves the configuration. Now that's a choice I had to make. Do I save it only when you shut it down, or do I save it every time? And so far I've decided to play it safe and save it every time. It doesn't seem to slow things down badly, even on this rather slow computer. By the way, since version 1, I have fixed it so that you cannot move this thing off the screen. There's also some little catch code, see if you can find it, that if you change the screen configuration and you're now on a smaller setting, then it'll actually move the icon to so that you can always see it. Right, and then below that is just some standard things that I always use. One is to check whether a file exists. And there's a very important one, where am I? Right, and there's actually two versions here. I've got the one that works on the current version of YAB, but only in a bound or compiled version. So what if you're running this from a script? Well, then it goes to this old fallback version. Right, and then I've got little subroutine here. I'm using a lot of system commands, and sometimes what you get out of the system command is a directory, and it's got that trailing / at the back, which I prefer not to have, because various outputs from POSIX utilities either have that / or they don't. So I'm rather always cut it off. And so I've got a standard little subroutine, which I put in most of my programs, really. I'd rather put them in myself. Then I always know what the situation is. So that's where we are at the moment. And much of this is probably going to end up in a library, because it's going to be part of a much bigger system. But for our purposes, I think this is as far as we will take it. And no, I haven't forgotten about this one here, but much of what I still needed to do with that is actually covered here. You know, the whole thing about changing screen resolutions, that was the main thing that I need to figure out there. So maybe we'll still have a episode about that. Okay, so once again, thanks for watching, and I hope you are enjoying this half of the YAB course.